Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
We're back with another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. Alert, this is a first responder show. So, if you have a healthy respect for first responders like all of us should, this is a great show for you to listen to, as it's going to go over being in that business, getting out of that business, and how. Before we get to my show's guest, I want to remind you that we have 10-minute clips of each episode on my YouTube channel at Jonathan Green RE. It's a great way to put the face to the name. You can listen to the podcast, then watch it, or you can watch it, then listen. Either way, I would appreciate it. This week, we have Ian Horowitz from Equity Warehouse. He's going to talk to you about how he retired early with small investments in passive assets and how he went from fireman to real estate investor. Let's go. This is episode 111 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Ian Horowitz. Ian is the co-founder of Equity Warehouse and a former fireman who figured out how to retire before 40 with his partner, Dan, by starting to use his family and friends' money. That's what we're going to talk about. Ian, welcome to the show.
Yeah. What's up, John? You know, it's a beautiful day. I'm out here on the East Coast. It's supposed to snow, so I'm trying to be as happy-go-lucky as I possibly can be.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to share and talk, and let's do it.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I think like the most important thing is figuring out everybody's journey. When was the first time that you thought of real estate as something that could get you out of being a fireman?
Yeah, so if we go back to like when we first started, you know, you got to remember we had a career that we could literally get killed in. Like right after we left our jobs, 3 of our friends got killed in a fire. Wow. 2 years later, 2 more firemen got killed. One of them was our rookie. The first 3 that died, I worked with one of the ladies for 5 years together, right? So when you're sitting there and you're talking about having family, you're talking about having your wife take care of your kids. It was like, dude, I'm making like 65 grand a year. I don't have any zero formal education whatsoever. I barely made it out of high school. And, you know, you sit there and you think about being dismembered, you know, you could be dismembered, you could be out of service, you could be killed tomorrow. Like a lot, you got to remember though, and I know we're jumping right into it, but
yeah, sure.
A lot of firemen, we would work side jobs, landscaping, construction, whatever it is, trades. Can you imagine getting killed or getting so incapacitated that hey, babe, I loved you, but you got this whole business and you got to go finish these 25 jobs that we have open-ended? And I was like, there's no way. And it really came to me, and through some other friends, other acquaintances, and thinking about how can I make money while I'm asleep at work? How can I make money? God forbid something happens to me. How can I leave a legacy for my family? I just kept coming back to real estate, and I'm glad we did it because I wouldn't have this big, beautiful beard because I'd still have to be cleanly shaved for the fire. So
yeah, what was the impetus to really take the first step, and which eventually led to the first deal?
Yeah, so you got to remember we got hired in 07 and 08, financial crisis. We get furloughed. Pension systems are going bankrupt all across the country. Obamacare comes into place. Everybody else pays more health care. They change our schedule. Companies are closing. Pension system basically becomes like a reverse Ponzi scheme because there's less people paying in because they keep taking personnel out of the workforce. And it was like, I got backed into a corner. There was no overtime. I was turning 30. My wife wanted to start a family. I couldn't imagine having our kids go to daycare because not only from the standpoint of someone else taking care of our kids, but more importantly, dude, I think daycare might have been more than my fire department salary on a weekly basis. And I was like, how do you do it? And really it was, I got thrusted into, I have to do something side by side with just saying, listen, man, I'm 30. I already have a job. My plan B is actually my current full-time job. And if this all goes wrong, like I still got it, whatever, I'll just be one of the dead broke firemen. I'll just declare bankruptcy, whatever. If this all goes wrong, screw it. Like, it'll work out. I got plenty of time to figure it out. I'm young enough. I can figure it out. Let's go do it. And, I had I had it all. I had horrible credit score. I had like a 570 credit score. I didn't have much money to my name, but I found something that worked for us. And I spent the last $15,000 that we had and bought our first house. And luckily I was forced into that situation.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because the first two things that we talked about, they're kind of different because the second version is really not the potential fear of death that comes with being a fire person, but it's that you start the job and then immediately the schedule's not what it's supposed to be. So even the money that you expected and the opportunities for overtime, which are good yet still dangerous as a fireman, were not there right away. So it's kind of like both things converging at the same time, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we could get into a great debate that our military, firemen, policemen, teachers, nurses should get paid way more than any professional athlete, but that is not a realistic situation. Right. So when you're looking at it and you do want a newer car, you do want a house that maybe has some land with it, you do want to be able to take care of your family long term and not have to have your wife work, it's $65,000 a year and you pay your pension and you pay your benefits and you put money into the deferred comp, right? Like you put money in the stock market that you can't touch for years. You're like, dude, like, how do I retire now? That's really what it was, man. It was like figuring out how to take that leap and take that step to get out of the vicious cycle. Because, as kids, I mean, we're probably similar age. You went through the whole, everybody, either you go to college or you get a government job. You pick, right?
I did both.
Yeah, see, there you go. So you spent a lot of money and then got paid a little, At least I didn't have to spend a lot of money to get paid a little. But with that same sense, it's like, if you just follow what they keep pushing down everyone's throat, and I think we've done a better job today in 2024, just for a timestamp, I feel like it's becoming more of a forefront. People are going to YouTube University. They're taking classes. They're not just going to college to go to college. They're going because they want to learn something I'd rather see people just take a risk. And if you're going to spend $150,000 on college, take that same $150,000, go learn some stuff and go put it into a business. Go learn how to go do something.
Yeah.
And, again, it's if you follow the standard path, you're just going to be a slave and that's it.
Yeah. And I don't think the standard path exists anymore because if you look at what happens, people get out of college, there's no better jobs than before you started. If you had worked for 4 years, you'd be way further ahead in your field because you'd be able to improve in whatever field you're in. A lot of people go to grad school and then they still come out, no jobs there. So, I mean, for me, when I looked at my kids, both of my kids one's in college and one isn't on purpose. Honestly, he was too smart for college. He can learn all this different stuff on his own time with things that he really wants to engage in. Whereas, even the first 2 years of college is just like going to high school again. They're kind of really telling you need to take these courses and these, and you only get a small amount of the freedom, that I found later on in my college career. Yeah, but I think also one thing we've had plenty of fire, police, and military on the show. And one thing I think is important is it's a little bit different if you were single and you started as a fire person, because then it's like, okay, I have the scale. I know what I'm getting in for. I'm not leaving anyone in case something happens, and you can really like overwork. But once you have a family, I think it comes clear for a lot of people in those positions. Like I'm in the line of fire, whether it be military, police, fire. And now I have a family that I need to take care of. And you're really coming to it for the right reasons. Were there any other options besides real estate, or when you just kind of started to get the vibe for real estate, it looked like the thing that might work for you?
I tried some other entrepreneurial things, again, it mostly revolved around side work, just picking up extra cash. Could I go make $2,000 doing a landscape job? Could I go do a tile job with another one of my buddies that was really good doing tile? But there was nothing like concrete to be like, I didn't get off on selling jobs to people and be like, oh, I'm going to go do your tile job and I'm going to become the perfect tile guy. I'm going to become the perfect landscaper. Like, I don't know. The whole customer service interaction thing from that standpoint did not excite me as much as like owning real estate. Like when you really start to break it down and think about it, it's like, dude, like when we first started, we started in single family real estate. It's like you can buy a house, someone will lend you the money, and then over the next 30 years, someone's going to pay you to live there and pay your mortgage off, and you're going to get some cash flow. So my initial thesis at the time. And this was nothing more than me sitting around the firehouse, drinking a cup of coffee, talking shit with the boys. It was like, well, if I could buy this house and I could be all in for like $100,000 and I could refinance it and get a $100,000 mortgage, my cash flow will be like $500. My rent will be $1,250. My mortgage will be like $650, and my rent will be like $500, or I'll make like $500 cash flow. Cool. Like, that's great. That's $6,000 a year. And then over 30 years, if that same house is only worth $120,000, who cares? Right. And it's paid off even better. And it's like, well, if I had 10 of those, then I'd have like 1.2 million. I'm going to do 30 years in the fire department, and 30 years from now, $1 million is going to be enough for me to retire. Ha, joke's on us, right? Like, we all know that's not enough money potentially nowadays. Yeah. But that was the initial thought process. All I need is 10 houses to pay me $5,000 a month to replace my wife's salary. And if I pay them all off, I have $1 million at the end of this whole thing if they don't increase in value at all. And that was really what allowed us to take those steps to get into real estate. And real quick, I know I went down that, but I would like to touch on the fact that becomes very selfish after a while to put your life on the line. And we need those types of people to protect us. I have nothing but admiration. I still love the guys that I worked with. I talk to them all the time, ton of admiration, but some of those guys are just stuck. And I wish they could take that idea of, let me just get one house, two houses.
Yeah.
Even if it's just two houses, knowing that you have some sort of nest egg and some sort of additional cash flow, and you can take care of your kids and your wife, if you're willing to put your life on the line, that they have something other than counting on the city to pay out, or the federal government to pay your wife, or the life insurance company to pay them. Give them something that they can live with. God forbid you are taken from this earth helping someone else.
Yeah, and I think it's changed over the years as social media has made it a little bit more accessible for people to see that there's other ways to make money. Because for firemen, usually, or all fire people, the side jobs was the thing. But like you were saying before, you don't see scale in just doing tile work or doing the contractor. It's just a one-off. Cool, I got $5,000, that's going to help, and you get by like that. But that doesn't help you get out of it, or even say like, okay, I get to retirement age and then I have something else to do. But I think now being able to see it, and then for you, did you see any other service people like that while you were getting kind of adjusted to real estate investing, where you said you could see, oh, look, well, they did it, now I can do it? Because I know a lot of people find a commonality and then they're like, wait, those guys are doing it, like we can do it.
Yeah, I found more commonality in actual operators that were doing it. Not so much, oh, that guy's a fireman and he did it. It was more in other operators actually doing it. And, when you look at it, it's like, cool, someone's willing to lend you this money, dude. Like, on paper, like, we're like worthless, but then you're willing to give me $100,000 to go do this deal. And once I started learning from some other people that did pay to go to college and had some sort of sophisticated background, it's like, man, Jack's really freaking smart. He went to Wharton School of Business. If I can only pick up like an ounce of what he tells me, like, I'm good. And I would just sit there and listen to other people. I would go do the events. I would just bump elbows. And from there, that's where we got the confidence. Because you got to remember, like, sitting around a firehouse kitchen table, just imagine going to a frat house or a tailgate and you're going to hang out with your boys and they just literally talk shit. And like, when you're like, hey man, I'm going to buy some rental real estate in the city, they're like, dude, did you just see the shithole house we were just, I apologize for cursing, but did you see the dump we were just in? Yeah. That's going to be you. You're going to be a slumlord. So-and-so at whatever company failed doing real estate a couple years back. He went bankrupt. This horror story of this guy. Nobody ever talks about the good. And everybody would tell me about the bad. And I was just like, I don't know why. Just had blinders on and said, look, that's fine. I understand, but I promise you it's going to be different. I'm going to do it different. And maybe they had those experiences. Thank you. I'll learn from them. But I have a feeling that we can do this and do it right. And at the end of all of it, when we were able to quit our jobs, it was a huge motivating factor for a lot of people to step out and say, this career isn't for me. I'm going to move on and go find another job. Or I want to invest with you guys because you guys really know what you're doing. Yeah. And that was like the stamp of approval.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point, and it goes to kind of upgrading the 5 people that you're around the most. It's nothing against your boys who you hang out with, when you're younger, or that type of, environment where there's that super camaraderie where it's kind of jokey and like, you're not going to do that. But then when you take yourself away from that and you go to an investing event and you're like, wait, all these people want to scale and make money and do it the right way, it upgrades you. Again, nothing against the group you were with, but you're not going to grow inside that group if every time you say something, hey, I want to do houses, and everyone's like, that's stupid. it's very hard to grow. So did it help you to get out and go to these other meetups where there was none of that type of dynamic going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, think about this. I'd sit around the kitchen table and I'd watch chiefs in the fire department with 30 or 40 years go to my buddy who was a loan shark and a bookie and literally say, hey, I need a payday loan until next Friday. I'm like, dude, you got 30 years in the fire department, make 120 grand. Like that's the money education that was around there. And it was like, it was hard. And then you got, so like in the fire department, we had 1,800 guys in Baltimore City. You had every walk of life, dude. They came from every single background and they lived their life in every single way. The good, the bad, the ugly, everything you see on the internet nowadays. And just seeing how people reacted around money, I wish that everybody had to read The Psychology of Money, where they had to read.
I was just listening to it yesterday.
Oh, yeah, it's such a good book. It is such a good book with principles. Or what we would tell is a lot of people is like, they're like, well, how did you and Dan do it? We'd be like, okay, well, let's see your budget. And they're underwater. Like I had to tell a rookie one time, all the guys finally got him to work up to talk to me. And I was like, all right, man, let's talk about it. So he writes down all of his assets. He writes down all of his liabilities. I literally had to look at him and said, you do realize you're worthless. He's like, oh, that's funny. I'm like, no, it's not.
Like, no, you're worth zero.
Here's Dave Ramsey's book. Start here. And if you're willing to take action, then we'll help you. And I think actually that negativity and that like, it's like not negative because like it's your boys and you're having fun like you were talking about.
I think it's an honesty.
The honesty and like not wanting to be like that and being like, there's got to be a better way. And then going to events and masterminds and sitting in rooms with people that have raised $50 million. They're doing several $1 million a year. They own 700 houses. You're like, well, if that guy can do it, yeah, he went to college. He might be a little bit smarter than me, but I feel like I can do something similar. And it was really just the two worlds colliding and taking the good from both sides and the bad from both sides and saying, this is what I like, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is our investment thesis, and off we went. So, but a lot of that comes back to being able to give back. It's a shame. A lot of guys end up in that service industry because they are good-natured people. They're willing to help people. Horrible money managers, right? A lot of that comes from the stuff that we see. A lot of gambling, a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, a lot of, just coping with a lot of things that it's like, man, like I do not want to be like that. And another thing that really resonated with me, not only from the bad money management side, it was also the guys that were there for 40, 50 years. I'm like, you're institutionalized. There is no quality of life at this point. Like, why are you coming to work and having someone else tell you what to do? Like, you have 40 years on the job. Like, it's time to go. One of the lieutenants I worked with, he literally worked in the riots in the late 60s. And then he worked in the riots in the early mid 2000, 2000 teens. And I'm like, yo, Lieutenant, like, that's a little insane. No, I'm the only guy to do it. I'm like, that's nothing to be proud of, man. Like, go home, go enjoy life, like, go retire. And those are the things that kept coming back to me. And another one, speaking of retirement, was, I don't know how many times you heard this around your government job. Hey, man, I'm retiring after 25 years. Cool. What are you going to do? I'm going to go work at Home Depot or Walmart, or I'm going to go work with my butt. I'm like, you're retiring to go work with someone else. Like, this does not make any sense to me. And all these things are just happening all at the same time. And I'm just going, yo, this is not right. I want to build something for ourselves and grow and go. So,
yeah. I mean, so if you look at that, I mean, I liken it to the way it starts really all the way from elementary school on. They're programming what you have to do, but they're not giving you the financial literacy to put it into place. So even though when you go to work for the government, they say, cool, we're going to take money out of your checks. It's going to go here. That's going to protect you, in 40 years when you retire, but they're not telling you what to do with your money. And if you're young, you're like you're saying, like, okay, well, I want to spend money. But to realize that you are technically worthless, like you said, that's a different realization. But I think that the difference between you and what other people were doing is you were interested in active learning. And if you're open to active learning, all you need to do is read Psychology of Money, or someone gives you Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then you're like, okay, holy shit.
Yep.
Like, this is real. I can do something. And I think a lot of people just don't do that because they're stuck in what you said. They're in the cycle. I don't have time. That's not for me, because they have a scarcity mindset around money because of how they grew up or their family. Is that what you've seen over the years?
Yeah, they just get embarrassed. Like, the book that really, really messed me up, and I don't know how many people read this, but George Anton, The Banker's Code, it's kind of quasi Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but it was like, if you can buy an asset that then pays for you to go buy something, like you want a new truck, okay, the payment's $700 a month. Well, instead of taking all that cash and going to buy it, like, can you put that into an asset that then produces you $700 a month? And that really clicked for me. And that's where my education really began. And then it was like, okay, well, how do I do this? Because I don't have a lot of money. How do I take that next step? And it was like, okay, well, someone will loan me money, even though I got bad credit, to buy a rental piece of real estate. Cool. I can get that. Cool. Now I can go buy a truck. I could go do more. At that time, I was like, if I could just get a truck, then I could go do my more side work. Let's make all this spin and go. And that education piece is really what worked for me. And, today I'm up here in Philadelphia now, huge Eagles fan, Phillies fan. I do catch myself getting caught up into sports a little more now that I'm back home.
Yeah.
But in the same sense, it's like when people say they don't have time, like, I don't think they realize, like, you see the culmination of all of our efforts, right? Like me and you here on this podcast, this is a culmination of all of our efforts, but we're up all night doing work. Like, I'd rather sit at the computer than watch TV. Like, I would work around the clock. When we would take runs, you would talk about education. When we would take runs, we would work 24-hour shifts, and we would go out to right where the riots happened. It's called North and Pennsylvania Avenue. It's where the CVS burned down in Baltimore City during the riots. And I'd be out there at 2 o'clock in the morning on a medic run. I would drive the guys on the fire engine. I'd pull out my phone, and I would just look at other people's deals, always learning, like, oh, so-and-so syndicated a deal this way. So-and-so's doing this type of real estate. So-and-so's doing this, like, raising money. And, well, instead of like consuming Instagram content, I'm consuming content that is teaching me something, and being on everyone's email distributions list and just going through the reps and seeing it and learning it. It's almost like film study, right? Like you're studying the film to that point where you see a deal and then boom, we're presented with the 76 unit apartment building. We hopped on it right away. We were able to raise $1 million and off we went. But if we didn't do all that education leading up to it, we would have never in a million years been able to tackle that deal.
Yeah. And especially, with fire, and I liken it to the military too, it's high intensity when it's going, but there's a lot of downtime. And in that downtime, it's the people who are learning that are going to be able to grow. I was just thinking of Buddy Rushing, who's a previous guest. He was deployed, and they're going through, an IED minefield. And he's saying, like, I'm reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad because you have to go so slow. Whereas everybody else thinks, oh, you're navigating a minefield. He's thinking like, well, I'm not driving. So this is what I'm going to do, read the books. And that's the same mindset that you're saying there. And I think it's important. And over the years, you've probably been able to get that over to people, like you said. And for some, it will mean leaving the force, which of course we don't want everyone to leave the force because we still want people to be able to protect us that way. But then others to be able to trust you to invest so that they have another vehicle where they don't have to be the full-time person. Maybe it's just not their jam. They don't want to figure that stuff out and work that, but they know that they can trust you because you've done it before. Is that something that you guys have worked with a lot of people who you've worked with now before?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of our investors are just friends and family, firemen, teachers, nurses, military, right? Like that's who resonates with us, but that's who I can explain our investments to. I break it down and say, look, we don't have these opportunities. You read about these things. And if you haven't read about these things, this is what you need to learn. Guys get hurt on the job. They get their workers' comp. They marry well. They sell, they inherit a house, whatever it is. It's like, hey, I got some extra money. I want to invest it. I don't want to do this job forever. If I do, when I retire, I don't want to do anything afterwards. And we're able to have those conversations, but you can't have those conversations if you're not financially sound. And I think that's where a lot of people get lost. Yes, we've built something out of not being financially sound, right? Like I had horrible credit. My business partner got caught up in the '08 refinance, couldn't refinance his house, all kinds of issues. But in the same sense, it's like if you don't have like financial wherewithal and the stability inside your own household, it's hard to invest. It's hard to participate in these type of things.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've had other guests who said the same, who do coaching, and they say the first thing that they'll say is like, well, where are you at with your finances? And if those aren't in, shape, you're not ripe to start investing money. You got to make sure that you have everything set so it's okay to invest money. Or especially like if your partner or spouse isn't on board with you dunking the money in. That brings up a good question, though. When you did take your only 15 grand and invest it into the house, what did your wife think at the time? Is she on board with that? Because this is where we find where it's really helpful that usually everyone who ends up on my podcast, the family at some point is all on the same page. Like, hey, we're in this together.
Yeah, initially it was a lot of conversation of like, hey, we got 15 grand. And she did say, look, it's our money too. Obviously it's easy for her to say today, I always believed in you. But, I'm sure she had reservations at the time and in real time. But prior to that, she had bought a house before we moved to Baltimore, was able to buy it and then refinance it and then had some additional cash and then rented it out. So she kind of understood the game of what we were trying to do. Actually, one of the catalysts to us getting started was, they sold and serviced outdoor power equipment, and they had a customer that would come in every year and buy new mowers. And they said, hey, where are you this year? He's like, well, I bought a rental house for the last a house a year for the last 30 years. Every winter I'd go buy a house when we weren't working, we'd fix it up and then we would rent it out. Now I got 30 houses. I sold the business and I'm done. And we had a lot of conversations around that gentleman of like, yo, if he did that, like, I'm interested in doing that. At the time, our retirement was only 20 years. I was like, I literally just want to do 20 years and get out. So how can we track something similar to what he did to allow us to get out and go down that road? So it's easy to say today that she was relatively supportive, but there was no like major roadblocks. There was no like blowout fights. Like I'm doing this or else. She was relatively on board and trusted that we knew what we were going to do. But I agree with you, man. Like your last $15,000, you're like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll get it back. Like that was always my.
It's so different though. It's investing in an asset that you can see. That's why I love real estate. You dunk your last 15 grand into the stocks. It's just in the air. Like I don't know what's really happening. What am I supposed to do? Just track it on a board? You can see the land and the building there, and if you do stuff to the building, it increases the value. And then you're like, wait, holy shit! Wait, we're up 20 grand.
Yeah, but that's the other thing is like how many people. And in our government jobs, we're like, well, put your money in your deferred comp or your TSP or whatever it is. Just put the money in there and it'll make money later. And you're like, well, I don't like when you look at stocks and getting a 2% dividend, you're like, how many millions of dollars do I need to make this worth my time? And the stock market has its fit. It's a storage of wealth.
I like it too. It's just it's not where I want to put, I don't rely on it like real estate because I can't do anything to improve it. So if I want to be involved, then I can add value by figuring out what to do with it. Not necessarily with my own hands because I'm not good at that. But somebody else can help it go up in value with my guidance.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like owning some paper, right? But that's the same thing. Is like, again, stocks is like everyone's willing just to relinquish control to a stockholder or to a public company. But then I'm like, hey, like you interested in investing $25,000 with us? And I'm like the devil. You're trying to steal money from me. I'm like. But the apartment building's right there. Like, I'll take you to it. I'll show you around. I'll show you what you do. But people don't believe in you because they think what we do is not realistic to them. But we've been so cultured to just invest in the stock market. Yeah. And, that's, I think, makes it difficult sometimes. And, again, that comes down to when you talk about education, like you were earlier, is continuing to educate people on what you do, learning and growing and finding other people that have similar and common goals as you do. So
and also, I mean, government or any companies that give you, a financial advisor as part of the package, they always say don't invest in real estate because they can't make any commissions if you're not buying all your money in stocks. So I mean, that's my dad was smart. He gave me, I had contact with my financial advisor when I was young, but he showed me everything about real estate. So there was only this amount with the advisor. And then he said, you make the decisions. They don't make the decisions. And I think a lot of people are cultured and brought up that way where it's like, oh, well, they said, I can't take the money out or I'm going to pay capital gains. It's like, but you could make 15 times as much. You're not making anything. It's just about the scale of what you think. But again, it goes back to scarcity mentality, how people were brought up around money. And like you said before, a lot of people have a hard time talking about money. They're either offended by people who have more or embarrassed that they don't have enough. Whereas it's like, it's just finite. You have what's in your bank account. Let's figure out how we can make it be more.
And there's one statement that has messed me up for a really long period of time. So like we had success. We started in 12, 13, really formalized our company in 14, had a lot of success really quick. And like 4 years in, I'm like, I'm ready to quit. But my business partner, we continued on. We really had an identity crisis around leaving the fire department. And I kept having all these guys, like you talk about being in other groups and these masterminds who were like, you don't want to bet on yourself? I'm like, oh, shit. And I'm like, what do you mean bet on yourself? I bet on myself every day. Like, you don't bet on yourself. You still have a job. And I'm like, and that one statement has just resonated with me every single day. And now it's like, I did bet on myself. And now my goal is just to stay unemployed as many days as I possibly can, And I think if you start to really think about that and like betting on yourself, and look, we're not saying, I think you're saying the same thing, is not everybody's going to go quit their job, but you should bet on yourself that you can trust that you can invest your money better, or you can find the right person to invest your money better rather than just taking what status quo is. And too many people just take the easy road and say, this is what they said to do. That's what I'm going to do. And it'll work out in the end.
Yeah, and that also can lead to bad investments by not doing the due diligence, saying, well, this person looks pretty shiny on social media, so I'll just dunk some money in with them without doing the research. And I think that's where it is. It's how much education do you want? Because the education and then the connection with other people who've done it give you the confidence to just move one step forward. Because I read that in your bio, it was like you said that you were willing to take action. But I feel like you, just based on our conversation now, that you were willing to take action because you were doing your own due diligence in the background on books, anything that you could get your hands on, meeting other people who've done it. And I found over the years that meetups and the physical connection are what takes all of that education, just gives you the confidence to go. Because like you said, you see the other person, that person who said, oh, I've done a house every year for 30 years. That's the millionaire next door. Nobody probably even knows he owns 30 properties. And he says it offhand, like, well, this is just what I do. I'm not going to post it on social media. And I think that's one of the big differences between then and now.
Yeah. And podcasts, I always ask people what podcast, like for a long time, I always listen to How I Built This before it got a little political for me. And I was like, yo, dude, like I liked hearing how Southwest built their company. I was like, why do you want to learn that? You're in real estate. I'm like, because I want to understand how other people think and always continuing to learn from them. And like you just said, the humble people that are actually doing deals. I want to hang out with the dudes that dress like me. This is how I dress literally every day. And that is it. Because you know what? In the fire department, the most respected firemen were the humble ones, not the ones that were like, I put this fire out. I did this. Yeah. I did that. Nobody cares about that. That guy shows up, does his job, and doesn't say a word. That's the guys that I want to hang out with. And the flash and all the whatever. If there's all that going on, I'm out. And I would tell people to shy away too, because it's just they're covering for something else. If you're really doing deals, you don't have time to go out and do all this well-produced stuff and think about all these crazy ideas. At that point, you're looking at marketers,
Yeah, I agree. Hey, it's Jonathan. This is just a brief interlude to talk to you about Deal Machine. Listen, I've used Deal Machine, and I was crushing it with my Concerned Citizen postcard on Deal Machine. You can look that video up on my YouTube and find out how I did it. It works. Deal Machine works. I've had David Lecko, the CEO, on the podcast. So if you want a free trial of Deal Machine, the elite Driving for Dollars app, and I'm telling you, it works if you use it correctly. You can go to my link at bit.ly/Zen Deal Machine. Now, bit.ly is bit.ly/Zen Deal Machine. It's free and you'll be up and running in 2 minutes, and then you can figure out if you want to keep it. Let's get back to the show. So how has your portfolio grown? I mean, since 2013, you guys have built up a big portfolio. What type of assets are you buying, and what's your favorite type of asset?
Yeah, so our concentration is heavily in self-storage and multifamily, but we've bought everything from single-family, Airbnbs, industrial, office space. We've run the gamut. And today, self-storage is probably one of my more favorite asset classes. And I'll get into that in a second of, the ease of management, the ability to diversify marketplaces and invest outside your jurisdictional area. Listen, I'll take you to Baltimore, I'll take you to the good places, but I can very easily take you to the bad places, right? And, at a certain point, you got to say, all right, I got some operational risk operating in Maryland all the time. I want to go, let's go to Texas, let's go to Louisiana, let's go to Mississippi, states that are pro-business. and be able to operate the way you see fit. But the only way we were able, I'm going to kind of change your question a little bit. The only way we were able to get into self-storage and multifamily was because we did single family real estate really, really, really freaking well for a long period of time. From 2000, like I said, 2013, 14, when we officially started, to about 2019, we grinded out single family real estate flips and subsidized rentals. That's all we did over and over and over again. Got really good, refining our practices, refining our property management, and then our banking relationships, our capital investor relationships. Then when that right deal came along from all the education, it was like, boom, 34 unit apartment building, I can handle that. 76 unit apartment building, I can handle that. Self-storage facility, I can handle that. And we were able to grow by building a great foundation to allow us to invest and buy those assets.
Yeah, before I get to self-storage, just a small comparison between Baltimore and Philly, because I think in a lot of ways they're similar. I know Philly market really well, but Baltimore is the same. Like you said, good areas, bad areas. To be effective in a city environment investing, you have to know which blocks are trending up and which blocks are trending down. Did that help you guys when you started in Baltimore? Because Baltimore's wide open price point, but you can go way wrong within just a very small block area. And I've seen that in Philadelphia as well.
Yep. You hit the nail on the head. That's how I know you're a really good investor for cities. It's a block by block basis, right? And we would get New York investors and DC investors. We would get a lot of Jewish money, and they would go into these areas. And I'm like, what are you doing? Our competitive advantage was we knew the real estate market, but we also listened to the radio. It's like, 27 Engine used to be really slow over in Northeast Baltimore. Shootings, stabbings, fires, overdoses. You're like, man, they're getting busier. You know what? I'm going to stay away from that area. And you would hear where they kind of stopped or where there was fires. And actually, we would take the fire cards and we would send mail to the fire cards and be like, hey, you had a fire in your house, you interested in selling? And that produced a few really, really good leads for us. But knowing the block by block basis and having that intel of like, here's a hard line, here's where this company was going, that allowed us to really build that confidence to buy in Baltimore City. But again, like you just said, that was a competitive advantage that we had against other investors that allowed us to be successful at a quicker rate.
Yeah, we did a Philadelphia Zoom for over a year, probably did about 50 deals just with people in that. And one of the people in the Zoom was a SWAT cop in Philly. And, a lot of people were looking around Strawberry Mansion and Brewery Town at the time, but like a lot of stuff goes down there. And I remember one call, he just popped on and he said, listen, it's a no-go on Strawberry Mansion just for the next a couple months. Like, don't come in there. It's not like, it's just not in a good spot. And I think that is your competitive advantage, and your knowledge of the blocks around cities is what can make a whole bunch of money or absolutely none and right into the trouble zone for both of those city type investing spots.
Yeah. And if you don't have like intimate knowledge of a city like that, we rely a lot on lenders. Like we would have lenders be like, I'm not lending there. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we know it's good. And there were some like risky areas that we were willing to take a risk on because we knew they were trending in the right direction. We always look for that.
You're betting on your advantage that, hey, like we've been watching this and this curve of the block is going the right way. That curve's going the other.
Yeah. And it was like, find the C to B area. We were never like B to A guys. We were always like C to B.
Yeah.
And that's what we were looking for. And if a lender was like, I'm a no-go there, you're like, all right, the guy's been around for a minute. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm too ahead of the curve. And we would always try to find blocks where it was like, there's 2 vacant houses on the block. We're going to infill those 2. I would never go find a completely vacant block and be like, I'm planting my flag and we're number 1. Absolutely not. You know? So,
sounds good until you try it.
Yeah. Well, unless you're buying the whole block and you have a lot of balls and a lot of money and a lot of security, it happens. I mean, dude, we just got beat up. Like, here's a real life story. We've operated in the city for a long time. Haven't bought anything there recently. We just bought something out on the western edge near UMBC. It's on the city side. It sits on Frederick Avenue, which is a main thoroughfare. A bank-owned property for about 3 years, haven't foreclosed since pre-COVID. And we got it back from the bank, and the place was just a wreck. 47 units. There was like 10 tenants left. We're evicting all of them. We had a tenant light the place on fire. And it was just like, dude, like the operational headache that comes with it. And this is a good area in the city with a really bad people in this asset. Those things happen too. And you need to be ready for what you're going to be up against, because some people just let stuff go. They just try to quick cash grab, and it becomes a mess really quick. So that was also really fun calls of, your capital investors calling you. Hey, I was on a fire this morning. It was at our property on Frederick Avenue. You're like, oh, great. What a great day. What a great way to start the morning. But you know what? You got the boys on your side, and it worked out the way it was supposed to. So
yeah, but that's a good point about what your investor tolerance is and who you trust. Like I always say, for D to D plus assets, they're definitely not for everyone. If you're good at them, you're going to make a whole bunch of money, but you better know that that's going to be the most maintenance and upkeep that you're ever going to have to do. Tenants, everything. That's D plus. But if you make the D plus to a C plus at some point, you're really over the barrel. You're doing phenomenal. But it's not easy. So there's people who are looking at better deals because they cost less. They cost less because they're in areas that may not go up. And that's something that's hard to fathom for everybody when they say, like, well, hey, it's in Baltimore. Hey, it's in Philadelphia. Like, do you know how big this is?
Yeah. Well, and those returns should be outsized, right? Like, that first house I bought, sure, I was in for 50 grand and got $1,250 rent, and I made $700 a month cash flow or $600 a month cash flow. But that was a really rough area at the time. Yeah. That's all I could afford and do. But then very quickly did we start trading up. And there's nothing wrong with operating in those areas, just no bigger vacancy, bigger headaches, getting robbed all the time. How are you going to underwrite for this? You might need a 40% return in year one to offset all the problem years you're going to have behind you to balance out your return. So I agree 100%. And I think the whole goal out of all this is, and what we did was we got started there, we owned them, and then we started trading up. That allowed us to get to better quality. Bigger is not always better quality, but better quality assets, and then bigger assets that were better quality and continue to grow from there. Had we just stayed at, the first house I ever bought over in the 4x4, it's like, man, I don't know how many of them I could have done. Like when I first started, I'm going to buy 100 of these right in this neighborhood. And then very quickly I was like, I don't know if I can handle more than 5 in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
But again, you talk about competitive advantages. We dealt with the people of the street every day. And that's a respectful way of saying it, is like, there's all walks of life that are going to rent your properties, and we're dealing in subsidized rentals. Sometimes you get really good people, and sometimes you just get horrible, horrible people. And I don't care if they pay cash or they have a Section 8 voucher, you deal with them. But again, we were dealing with people in the worst situation of their lives. And the fire department lost a kid, lost a grandma, the house is on fire, someone just got shot. It's like, you knew how to deal with those situations and diffuse them, and then get the tenants to be on your side and be like, all right, I understand your position. I'm squatting on you. Let me get out. Right. Or I didn't pay my rent. Let me get out, and being able to diffuse those situations was something that was also a help for us to be able to go.
Yeah, that's a great point and a great use of your background, because I've always said, when people talk about slumlords, they are talking about a real part of landlords who don't care about the tenants. But in my point of view, every tenant is caretaking your property. Like you said, they can just light it on fire, put rocks down the toilet. They can do whatever they want while they're in there, and you're not going to be able to stop them or prove it. So even if you do have a terrible tenant, the only way out is to try to negotiate your way out of it nicely. There's just no other options. Evictions are very hard in the Northeast. So it takes a lot of time, and you have someone who's sitting there knowing you're going to evict them. So you're never going to see a rent after you start an eviction proceeding. So it's just one of those things where your background really helped. You're dealing in these trauma and traumatic situations that you realize, like, okay, I have to take this to my portfolio now.
Yep. And it only got worse after COVID. And again, that was another reason for us to, it pushed us into self-storage or alternative asset classes from single family of like, dude, COVID hit, it really exposed who's in control and who's not, who's really in control of your assets. You aren't, how backed into a corner are you going to get? Whereas self-storage, we were able to perform during those times. And had we not taken those steps and had we not been in subsidized housing, COVID could have been really, really, really bad for us.
Yeah.
But it actually wound up being very good and very beneficial.
Yeah, self-storage is a great transition because I find it always to be recession-proof. If there is a real recession, people are going to move smaller. They're still going to have the same amount of stuff, so they need storage. If they're going bigger, they're going to need to store other stuff, whatever, golf clubs or something. And I'm sure you do it for the same reasons that a lot of us look at it. No human tenants and very limited water, meaning there's just sprinkler systems and maybe one bathroom. So your risk of, catastrophe is very limited.
Yep, you're dealing with a metal building, you're dealing with a garage, right? And you should not be dealing with people living on your site, but it happens. You
Once
are
in a
not,
while.
it happens. Listen, man, it's a part of life.
Yeah.
But you're right. There is no water. There is none of those types of issues. Dude, when you're dealing with someone who's living in your house, and this is like a good, bad thing that happens is they become entitled. And they're like, this is my house. And I'm like, well, thank you, but the toilet's running and I want to come fix it. Well, I got to be home. I got to watch over you. I don't want, it's like, yeah, but I'm paying the water bill and I'm coming to fix this today. And there's all these issues where someone's garage door is broken. It's like, listen, get it secured. We'll get someone out there. It's not like some major issue, you know? And yeah, dude, right now in the Northeast, no heat. Those calls happen all the time.
Yeah.
And big issue.
Yeah. I mean, you have to know, again, you have to have systems set up. And that's what I think is hard for new people. They try to scale too fast. There's like some newbie buys a 10-unit apartment complex and they think, oh, it's no big deal. I'll just manage 10 tenants. Well, have fun when the heat goes out, and you have one major furnace for all 10 units and you don't know what to do with it. And it costs, $47,000 to replace.
Right. Whereas if the power goes out at the storage facility, we open the gate, put it on manual, and it's like, okay, come get your stuff. But everybody knows, yes, there's a small security issue. But for the most part, for 24 hours or whatever this time frame that something's broken,
they have locks on their units also. Yep. So even if you can get into the unit, self-storage is a great asset. I mean, I learned about it when I was using it, because I just had access. And it's the one place where you can continually raise rents and no one's going to move stuff because you raise them so small. It doesn't make sense. Like I always say to myself, I've probably talked about this before. I have a bunch of art in storage, and it's just like every time it goes up, I'm like, is it really worth? If I counted how much I started at and how much I'm at now, it would be worth moving. But it's like, well, it's only like $15. So
they get you there. And then something we recently implemented that you can't do on your residential tenants is I implemented a payment processing fee and a facility management fee and a monthly admin fee. I just increased 3,000 tenants by $10 a month. That is $30,000 a month. And I mean, dude, that's almost $7 million of perceived value potentially at a time of sale by raising $10. Do you imagine if I raised 20, 30, $40? Now do that same number against a residential real estate. You're not going to get that in the single family. You might get some of it out of a multifamily or somewhere where you're going to get capitalization rates. But on single family, it's like you're only going to get what the market allows you to get. And the nice thing about self-storage is you get to operate a business inside of a real estate asset. So you underwrite the real estate that we all know and understand that we've learned to come to love. And you get to operate a real operating business. So as rents right now are retracting in the self-storage industry, we were able to implement a $10 monthly recurring fee because most people expect fees nowadays. And side by side with that, it's like, well, I'm keeping up with the retraction in rents, but I'm picking it up somewhere else that I'm not losing this money as people move out or move in because there is a real retraction in rates. But yeah, it's fun. And there's a lot of other ways to make money, $25 for 24-hour access, lock fees, there's a lot of additional revenue streams that you can make inside of self-storage that you can't make inside of residential real estate.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have started to put in kiosks where there's locks and other things, which, you don't need an on-site manager at all time. A lot of people have managers who manage kind of multiple properties and then do a kind of run through. It's a very scalable business. And I think the biggest thing that people miss about self-storage is, especially when you're going outside a city, you're looking for self-storage facilities where there's more room. There's square footage that is not used by warehouses, and they just drop some more of the same thing on there. And the mom and pop owners just never wanted to do it. They were comfortable with their 14 units that could be 45.
Yep. Yeah. We're looking in 3 to 5 mile radiuses. So you could go into almost any marketplace, depending where you are, and you can potentially go in and build, or you could go in and buy. And we like to buy mom and pops. We're value add guys. We go in and buy the mom and pops. We come in and put look at me. I'm sound so techie. Put in a tech stack, right? You come in and put in a website and a phone number and a call center and a kiosk and all these other fun things that allow people to automate the facilities. We run 700,000 square feet, 15 properties, all from either Baltimore or Mississippi. And we have boots on the ground at all the sites, but our call center agents are between Baltimore and Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and they run the whole portfolio. And you can't do that. I mean, you could do that potentially in residential real estate. But you really need to have good eyes and good people on the ground and have a good contractor base out there. Like, I don't need some massive contractor base. I need maybe one electrician and a good gate guy and a good boots on the ground guy and maybe a door guy. And that's it. I don't need a plumber, electrician, an HVAC, a roofer, all these things to get stuff done. And you're dealing with metal buildings. Metal buildings are super durable.
Yeah.
And there's not much to them. There's a couple screws and that's it. So self-storage has been fun to expand into for us.
Yeah, there's very little user error in self-storage. Like, your card doesn't work. Okay, you can't get in. But there's not a lot of people who like break the metal door, and there's no stoves, there's no bathrooms except for one. Like, there's just not going to be the same amount of problems that you would have. So it's an interesting asset that a lot of people have scaled into.
How many people in your audience would love this? Residential tenant doesn't pay rent. I lock them out on the 5th day where they can't get into their house. You can't do that. You will be on the front page of the paper, if not every major news channel in the country.
Yeah.
Right. But in self-storage, day 5, guess what? The PIN pad to get into the facility doesn't work. They got an overlock on their unit. You got to pay your rent for me to give you your stuff. Right. And the forefathers of self-storage that came up with the lien laws were some of the smartest dudes out there. I appreciate them because that is one of the best laws that are out there. California tried piercing it a little bit during COVID, but that lasted all of 2 seconds. And lien laws remained in place all through COVID. Rent increases remained in place all through COVID. And it's one of the best competitive advantages inside of real estate because you are truly in control of your asset. And I think that is very important nowadays.
Yeah. I agree. What's one piece of advice you would give to somebody who's just trying to get started now based on your history of getting started and getting it going so quickly really over the years, but really maintaining this good mindset also along the way? Dude,
swing the bat. Too many people sit on the sidelines. How many people have listened to your podcast, had however many hundreds of guests come through? Oh, I'm going to do it next week. I'm going to do it next week. Just go do it. And if you can't do it, go find someone to do it with, or invest with, or whatever it is. Just go swing the bat. And I think early on, having that risk aversion of just being all right, I'm just going to go do it. And if I'm wrong, screw it. At least I tried it. And being able to swing the bat, going out and doing it. There's too many education pieces out there between podcasts, YouTube University, master classes, mastermind, whatever you want to do. You could be at an event every night of the week in a different part of this country every single weekend to learn real estate, and you should just go do it. There's no doubt in my mind that you should 100% do it. Swing the bat. Yeah. Awesome. Is the best place for people to get in touch with you guys at equitywarehouse.com? Yeah. If you want to learn more about what we do, how our friends and family co-invest with us, check out equitywarehouse.com, or you can find us on any of the social sites at Equity Warehouse. I'm the most responsive on Instagram. If you want to shoot us a DM, I usually answer them. But that's where we're the most active. If not, we're on all the other platforms, and always happy to talk to someone, especially if you're a first responder and you really do want to get involved in real estate and take that step forward and swing the bat. Yeah, absolutely. We will link to everything in the show notes. Ian, it was a pleasure. Great conversation. And I think really another notch in the belt of first responders, military, who have figured a way to supplant that. And some do both at the same time. But yeah, I hope that you do get some reach outs from that for people who just needed this to get them to take the step. And then that first step is contacting you. Then the next step eventually will be getting that first property going. So appreciate your time, man. Hell yeah, let's do it. Thanks for having me on. Yeah. All right. That was Ian Horowitz of Equity Warehouse. I'm Jonathan Green. See you next episode. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with me, Jonathan Green. And I just want to remind you, and this is always an uncomfortable part, I don't want you to think that I'm begging for you to like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you have to do for the podcast, leave a 5-star review. But if you like the podcast and you think it adds value in the real estate investing sphere, then just do me a personal favor. Like the podcast, follow it, share it when you can with your friends, and be so kind as to write a 5-star review if you believe it deserves a 5-star review up against what else is out there. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you keep listening.